In today's episode of the KC Sports Authority podcast, we preview the Battle of the Blue Bloods as Kansas heads on the road at Indiana this weekend in Assembly Hall for what will be a classic Blue Blood matchup of two of the top programs in college basketball history. We dive into that matchup, give the scouting report on Indiana, and talk about KU's chances.
Hey, what's good, y'all? It's your boy JD6 here. I'm with my man. Shout out to KC Sports Authority. Make sure y'all go check that podcast out, man.
You heard the man. And welcome into the KC Sports Authority podcast. Keegan, JB, and Spencer here with you. The three of us have not been on a podcast in a hot minute. How are we doing, fellas?
Man, it's been a minute. I'm happy to be back. I was in Wisconsin for a little bit. My wife and I enjoyed a baby shower with her best friends, and for anyone that didn't know already, we talked about it a couple times. We got a baby on the way, baby girl due in February. So
Getting closer.
It's getting closer. So a lot of things are turning, and just kind of caused me to be a little busy. But it feels so good to be back on.
Well, we got a lot to get into in this episode, but first, a couple logistical things to get out of the way. Of course, if you have been following along on the podcast for a while now, first off, thank you. If you're listening to us on Spotify, you can follow the podcast on there. You can like it. You can leave us a 5-star review and some comments. If you're watching over here on YouTube, we would very much ask that you hit that subscribe button here real quick. Get us to 250. We're really close. And then after 250, we've got a lot more coming away. So do us a quick favor, hit that subscribe button. We hope you guys continue to come back for each episode. We've got Chiefs, Royals, KU stuff, got some sports betting stuff coming up. A lot of fun guests I'm hoping to have on here real soon. So make sure you're checking us out here on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button so you stay up to date. And of course, if you want to follow us on any of our social medias, we got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at KCSA Pod. And the other thing real quick here, I've been talking about it for months and months and months, trying to get us some merch, some t-shirts going on. And I finally got the first one in to test out. This is a dry fit material with our logo on it. Hopefully here soon we'll have the opportunity to potentially sell some shirts to anybody that wants to jump on and get some merch with us. So excited to do that, but that is not quite ready yet. Still running the numbers on that. So if you guys do have interest in shirts, of course, I know we've got a lot of friends and family interested, but anybody else podcast listener-wise, you will have that opportunity coming soon to get shirts. So stay tuned. You'll have shirts with our logos on them, shirts with the Aftermath logo, T-shirts, sweatshirts, all that kind of stuff as we get into other merch. So stay tuned Keegan, for that. Yes.
I got an idea, man. I hate to just give you this idea without running it by you first, but I'm putting up some money. Here's what I want to do. If you want a KCSA Pod t-shirt, all you have to do is comment, like the video, share it with your friends. You gotta leave a comment. We gotta get some engagement going. Make sure you're subscribed, and we may or may not just pick a lucky winner to get a free t-shirt. How about that? And I'll front all the funds for a free t-shirt. I don't mind doing that at all.
How about we pick 3 people?
Let's do it.
Since there's 3 of us on the pod, let's do 3. But yes, in order to be eligible, you have to like this episode once you see it. Leave a comment. Leave us let's do this. Leave us a rock chalk in the comment section or your game score prediction. And after the Indiana game, after that game is over, we'll go back and pick a winner from YouTube, and we'll leave a comment with that person to hit us up, and we'll get your sizes. So that when we do the first order, we'll get you a shirt. So I like that.
Let's do it.
I'm good with that. Let's do it.
Okay,
so guys, let's get into it. Kansas, Indiana preview, Battle of the Blue Bloods this weekend. KU heads to Indiana, one of the top programs in the country. Not necessarily recent history, though. This is not your father's Indiana Hoosiers, I guess, as people like to say. This is not a bad team by any means, but this is not the Indiana Hoosiers of the Bob Knight era that were one of the original Blue Bloods. This team has had some decent years over the last 25, 30 years, but they're not your typical top of the blue blood, but they are the old school blue blood matchup. Indiana coming into this, some of the headlines as we get into this game, Indiana 7-2 on the season. They just started Big Ten play 2-0. Just like Kansas, they've had a pretty in-depth schedule so far, and we'll get into more of their preview here soon. But first thing up here for this game, headline-wise, is Hunter Dickinson back in Big Ten country. As we know, Hunter Dickinson has been hated across Big Ten country, and we saw that in Chicago this year when Big Ten fans stayed just to get rowdy and hate on him. So we know he's going to come into a very hostile environment and is going to have a lot to look forward to in that matchup. I did pull up last year the 2 games against Indiana. He played Hunter Dickinson in the first game. Surprisingly, they lost Michigan. I mean, Michigan was not good last year. Michigan lost to Indiana twice. Indiana was a top 25 team. Very good. KU, of course, had the home and home with them last year, and Trace Jackson Davis was fantastic. All-American candidate and Player of the Year finalist. Hunter Dickinson went 16-6 in their first game on 6 of 10 shooting. And then in the second game was an overtime game. Still lost by 2. He had 24 and 14 on 10 of 17 shooting and 2 of 4 from the 3-point line. So definitely some familiarity there, which of course we'll dive in a little bit further in the predictions and matchups. But guys, the other 2 headlines I have in here is this is KU's first true road test. Obviously, they've played games outside of Allen Fieldhouse this year, but this is really their first true road game at another team's home venue, and not just any place. Assembly Hall's got to be one of the maybe 5 most iconic college basketball arenas in the country. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah, it gets loud in there. It's pretty iconic to say the least. You think of Allen Fieldhouse for Kansas, you think of Cameron Indoor Stadium. Indiana, it's right up there with the rest of us. So should be a really, really good environment.
Yeah, it'll be a loud place for sure. And the impact it'll have on the game is similar, I think, to when we're at Allen Fieldhouse, of course. So it'll be packed. There'll be a lot of boos. There'll be a lot of red. There'll be a lot of hate towards Hunter Dickinson. It's going to be a tough matchup, which, of course, we'll talk about in the previews here. But Spencer, question for you, because my other headline here is bench production. Obviously we talked about this in our most recent KU basketball episode, or I guess 2 episodes ago now, where we were just laying out the season so far. Give me your thoughts on the bench production since then, and how worried, concerned are you with where that bench production is sitting so far coming into a true road matchup?
Well, we're coming off a Mizzou game where there wasn't a whole lot of production coming off the bench. Timberlake going for 3 to 4 points, Furphy not going for much. So I think at this point, it's not a concern with the younger players. I really think that there needs to be development as the season progresses. But at this point, I'm a little bit worried about Timberlake. He's played a lot of games in his career, and he's not getting going yet. And, it's a different role. It's a different system. It's a different offensive style than what he's used to. So, again, I think we should allow grace. I never want to write anybody off in December by any means. But he's probably the biggest concern now, because really the expectation is he's coming in that second unit and providing the spark off the bench. So he hasn't done that yet. So I think it's really going to be telling, especially on a true road test, like you said, the first true road test of the season, playing in such a difficult place to play. How does he show up and play? How does he and Furphy, how do they show up as shooters, and how well do they shoot on the road? That can be really challenging, especially with a pretty loud arena. So I think it's a concern. I'm not like 90% of KU Twitter. I'm not waving the white flag already saying that we're a terrible team. But I do think if we don't see a good showing here, it's going to be time to maybe look at things, look at switching up the lineup a little bit, look at rotational minutes. And if I'm I'm just trying to draw up some plays for these guys to get them involved early once they're in the game so they can get in rhythm as soon as possible.
What I find funny about the bench talk conversation every year is, and I know I'm guilty of this too, every year coming to the season, you're like, all right, this team is stacked. This team is deep. They've got 10, 11, 12 deep. They're going to be fantastic. This is going to be one of Bill Self's deepest teams ever. He's going to have a full team to play with, yada, yada, yada. And then 3 or 4 games in, we're all sitting here going, dang, the bench provides nothing. However, we always seem to forget that come conference play, no matter if there's 10, 12, 15 guys, whatever the case may be, this rotation is always going to dwindle down to 7 to 8, Bill Self's going to play his 5 best players he trusts the most consistently. And that 6th, 7th guy, he might be lucky to get 20 minutes that night. And then the other guys after that just aren't. So even though the bench has struggled, not just production wise, but just in general, and haven't offered a whole lot, I don't think fans need to get too worked up about it, because we don't really need the bench to be scoring that much, because a majority of your offense is coming from your starting 5 anyway. If we're averaging 50 points a game between Hunter, KJ, and Kevin, then you just need another 25 points on average across, DeJuan, Elmarko, and the bench. So I don't get too worked up about it. Obviously, you would like to see them more productive. I think it's difficult when you're talking about the bench, because they're not going to get a ton of minutes. DeJuan's going to play 37 minutes a night. So there's a lot of minutes gone there. That means Elmarko's not really sliding over to the 1, letting somebody else slide in at the 2. Hunter, if it's a close game, he's going to play 35 minutes a night. So Parker Brown's not going to have to do a lot. Parker's been solid. I think he's been fantastic in his role. I'm not too worried there. Really, it's the conversation of Nick Timberlake, Johnny Furphy, and Jamari McDowell. Who's going to get minutes? Who's going to get the most trust? And which of those guys can show up and have an impact? McDowell looked good early on the season. He's also looked a little bit like a freshman in the last couple of games. Furphy, same thing. He's had bits and pieces here where in moments where he's done well, and then also times where he hasn't. And of course, Nick Timberlake just can't get in a rhythm. But JB, I want to ask you, what do you think the deal is with why Timberlake struggled so much coming into this year?
Spencer kind of alluded to it, but yeah, it's a brand new system for him. He's used to being the guy, and now he has to be the 4th or 5th guy. And I think one of the things that he kind of struggles with might be confidence too. He's kind of been jumping back and forth between, am I a starter? Am I not a starter? More often than not, he's not a starter. Elmarko has been getting the nod, and is that kind of digging into his confidence? Maybe that's it. One thing I really wish I could see from Timberlake in particular is I just don't want him to try to do too much. It's okay to be the 4th or 5th option. It's okay to come off the bench and just hit a 3. I think we saw that in the UConn game. I want to say, I think the Missouri game too. Honestly, I specifically remember him coming in and nailing a 3 within
corner 3.
What was it? The first or second possession that he was in off the bench. I mean, that's all we need from you, Nick. That's all we need from you, dude. Just come in, nail a 3 and D. That's all we need from you. And I know that's only half of his skill set. Doesn't matter. We've got the personnel to handle everything else. If he just concentrates on 3 and D, I think it'd be really good for us down the stretch, and maybe find a little bit more confidence back, because what does Bill Self want? He wants defense. And if you show that effort on defensively, and if you're nailing your shots, you're going to find more time on the floor, but you got to stick in that role, because sometimes we see him trying to do a little bit too much. He tries to display his athleticism. I remember when we first heard about him coming to Kansas, we were excited because we were like, hey, this guy, yeah, he can shoot, but he can get up there and dunk too. He's got some Grady Dick to his play, but I don't want to see Grady Dick. I don't want to see. Of course, it'd be great if Grady's stuck on the team. That's a whole other conversation. But we need Nick Timberlake to just come in and shoot 3s and play some defense, because I think at the times when he tries to show his athleticism at the rim, I think he's getting humbled a little bit. It might sound a little harsh, but that's just kind of what I see from him so far.
I think really the problem with him is the defensive side, or the lack of defense on his part. We knew coming in he wasn't going to be a tremendous defender. He wasn't even asked to do that back at Towson. He was the primary scorer. But we know how a Bill Self team works. If you can't play defense well, you're not going to see the court. And I think the frustration there is, just like you said, I was at the Missouri game, and he had such a quick leash with him. He'd come in, hits a 3, and then on the very next possession, missed assignment, lets a guy score, throws the ball away, turnover, whatever the case may be, misses it, and he's out, 2 minutes later. Well, if you're only getting 3 minutes at a time, if that, how do you get any momentum? But two, I think it just overemphasizes the significance of what you have to be able to do in those 2 to 3 minutes. Whereas some of these other guys, Parker Brown is getting a few more minutes because he is a defensive guy and he can and provide impact there. But Spencer, of these three guys on the bench, and I'm going to leave Parker Brown out because we know he's going to play no matter what. Of those three guys, who do you feel like you have the most confidence in the rest of the way? And of those three, which is the guy do you think that's going to provide the biggest impact?
I'd say who I have the most confidence in is Furphy. I think because of his ceiling and his potential to develop. We know Self is good at developing players, so especially along the course of a season. So I have the most confidence of him coming in and providing, that stretch wing role. Again, we've talked about the physical tools, his potential as a defender. So I would say he's the one I have the most confidence in. And in terms of that guy, coming in and providing the spark, I do think that can be Timberlake still. Again, I'm not writing them off. I refuse to do that, especially to a guy as talented and as experienced as he is. I think by the time March rolls around, this guy's going to be coming in and we're going to see 2-3 threes a game, maybe not a whole lot of minutes. He's not going to be like the starting unit and playing, 40 minutes, 41 minutes if there were time allowed. But I do think he's going to be, that guy that's coming off the bench and providing a punch once the starting unit is taken out.
Yeah, bench production, definitely a question mark. It's going to be a question the rest of the year. Just need to see those guys have an impact. But enough of that. Let's dive into this Indiana team. Let's get into the scouting report a bit here. Let me flip back over my screen. As we kind of look at Kansas versus Indiana on paper, Indiana averages about 74 points a game. They also give up about 73 points a game. So their margin, even though they're 7-2, isn't fantastic. Shooting under 50% from three. The two biggest things I circled as far as statistically on them is they only average about 34 rebounds a game. So that is below where KU's at, of course. So that says potential advantage KU. They also don't really, create offense off of assists very well. They only average 14 assists a game. But diving into their schedule, 7-2, some of the big games on their schedule, of course, they played UConn and got blown out 77-57. They also got blown out by Auburn, another good team. That was not even close. They do have good wins over Maryland and Michigan to start Big Ten play. Win over Louisville, but that was a close game. Louisville's not anything good. In their wins, they're averaging about a 6-point to 7-point margin in their wins. But those two big losses, of course, really pulled those statistics down because they gave up, 104 to Auburn and then, of course, 77 to UConn. So take what you want with the schedule. I think what it does show is they have played several good teams, so they're not going to come into this game lightly, but maybe that does give us advantage in the fact that they haven't played well against some of the top teams. But the Auburn game was at home. The UConn game, I forgot to double check this, so I'm not going to, don't quote me on it, but it was a home game. I don't remember if that was in one of the early season tournaments or not. As we look at the roster, though, I guess I could have put this in the headlines, but there's two guys that KU fans might see some familiarity with on that team because one of them was supposed to sign with KU, and we all thought he was going to sign here, and that's Mackenzie Mbako, the decommit from Duke freshman who decided to sign to Indiana. KU fans were not happy when that happened, but if we're being honest, KU fans, Mbako has not had a good year so far. In his 7 games he's played, he's averaging 23 minutes a game, scoring under 9 points a game, shooting less than 40% from the field, 20% from the three-point line. Just hasn't looked very good. He's also had some of his off-the-court issues. So maybe a bullet dodge there, fellas. What do you think?
Man, I was so mad when he didn't choose us, dude. I mean, we could still use a guy like him, but man, I think he's probably just trying to get used to a new system as well. I could see him having a decent game against us just because there's so many factors that go into this game. Just overall, roster aside, I mean, this is going to be a road game. They're going to play with a ton of energy, a chip on their shoulder. They want to erase that embarrassing loss to Auburn, and I'll say embarrassing just because of the final score. And it's Indiana and Kansas. Indiana fans want to prove that they're blue bloods, and there's a sector of college basketball Twitter that doesn't consider Indiana to be a blue blood. And yeah, it's there's going to be a lot of emotion. I think Mackenzie Mbako, he's going to want to have a good game and show that he made the right choice for him. But man, I just hope Kansas wipes the floor with him.
Yeah, I wouldn't be disappointed with Mbako struggling again. He hasn't really, I mean, he's got several games in double figures, but he hasn't shot the ball well. He has not played very well in their biggest matchup so far yet. Spencer, did you have anything on that you wanted to add?
Well, I was going to say, you never know how a guy would perform in a different environment and a different team. So he struggles with Indiana. He may not have struggled with us. That being said, shooting around the 40% mark as a forward is not good, or because the majority of your shots are coming pretty close to the rim. It's not like he's taking contested 18-footers or long threes or anything like that. So it's not been the best performance this season. I don't know if I go so far as to say dodge the bullet, but it does seem that we're faring okay without him.
Yeah, he's got 2 games where he shot at least 7 3-pointers. In those 2 games, he's 3 of 14. He's got another game of 0 for 3 and one of 1 for 5. So definitely struggle there. Probably taking too many outside shots to start off the season. But yeah, freshman. You never know how a freshman's going to respond. But the real big guy to be concerned about, not just about the team, but a guy KU also looked at in the transfer portal this offseason. That is their big man Khalil Ware, the 7-foot, 240-pound sophomore transfer from Oregon. He has been their guy this year. He's averaging almost a double-double, 16.7 points a game, 9.2 rebounds a game. He's shooting 60% from the floor. This is their guy. This is who everything runs through. He's a beast. He's a monster. I'm excited for this matchup because I like to see how Hunter fares against these other big guys that are similar to him. And, Hunter struggled against Mizzou. Mizzou had some length and athleticism. Even though Vanover didn't play a ton, he struggled to get a shot up over the 7'5" Connor Vanover. He struggled in Marquette against their near 7-footer. So Hunter struggled a little bit when he goes up against a guy of his size. So I'm excited about that. But Khalil Ware is really where you need to start with Indiana, in my opinion. I can dive into some of the statistics with him, but there anything off the top about him that stands out to you guys?
I would say, the size is one thing. He's such a big body, and combine that with the fact that, he's very efficient. Again, a lot of shots coming around the rim. He's at 60% from the field. I don't know how many attempts he's on in the season, but I think he's at 50% from the 3 too. I know he might have only taken 2 and made 1. I'm not sure.
He's about 12 3-pointers on the year.
All right. That's enough. We're almost 2 a game at that point. So again, to be shooting 50% as a 7-footer.
He's also shooting pretty well from the free throw line. He's shooting 80% from the free throw line for a 7-footer.
That's also a concern, regarding Hunter. We saw it in the Marquette game. The player's name is escaping me, but they had a pretty lanky 7-footer coming off the bench that was pulling threes. Multiple times Hunter was going under and he couldn't make it out to contest it. So I'm really curious to see what kind of adjustments we're going to make with those stretch bigs to see if we can cover the ground. Because as a center, it's probably pretty challenging to have to go out of the paint. Number one, you're out of the paint for help defense, rotations, and defending the rim. To go out there and guard somebody that's your size, that's taking threes and shooting them effectively. So that's going to be something that I have my eye out for sure.
Yeah, he's the guy that as I'm going through some of his game logs here, he scored in the 20s 3 times. His best game on the year was against Harvard. Of course, not a great team, but they only won by 13, and he scored 28. The games I wanted to look at was that, of course, Auburn and UConn. UConn, he struggled. He scored 11 points on 5 of 6 free throws, but only shot 2 of 10 from the floor. We know UConn's got tons of length. So maybe that bodes well that he, just like Hunter, I think any big guy struggles against other big guys of their size. Michigan, he shot 6 of 10. Maryland, he was 8 of 12. And then that Auburn game, another game he struggled. Went 2 of 8 from the floor, but 8 of 10 from the free throw line. So the other thing that stands out to me by him there is he knows how to get to the free throw line, and he's effective when he gets there. So a good matchup to watch out for. Of course, Hunter on him. Don't want to see Hunter get into foul trouble. Not that, Parker Brown couldn't hold his own against him, but if he's getting to the line, he's getting 8 to 10 free throws, that's just easy points for him when you're shooting an 80% clip. So if we're letting him get 8 points in the game just from the free throw line, I don't think that bodes well. But I think that's where you start with Indiana. JB, anything you want to touch on with Khalil Ware? Other than if we didn't get Hunter, he was next on my list of the guy that we needed.
Oh yeah, he would have been a stud for us. I mean, I am a little concerned when you look at Hunter's track record of going against guys that are of similar size to him. But honestly, I think if anything, they can cancel each other out. I'm not looking at this like this needs to be someone we're incredibly afraid of, because I think overall this matchup between Kansas and Indiana is going to come down to a little bit more than just how does Hunter do against Ware and how does Ware do against Hunter. I think the game is going to be won by our other guys like Kevin McCullough and KJ Adams. I think that's where we get our points. I can definitely see this being another game where Hunter is not our primary focus and he's not our leading scorer. That being said, I think he'll continue to be our leading rebounder. We are going to dictate the pace in this game. Luckily, we have more weapons, in my opinion, than Indiana. So honestly, I'm not really too concerned about Ware.
Outside of Ware, the next guy you want to circle on this Indiana team is Malik Renault. He's a 6'9", 230-pound sophomore, averaging about 15 a game, shooting about 56% from the floor. Not shooting great from three, hasn't taken a lot of shots, but he's only hit one on the season. But he's kind of been their most consistent guy all year outside of Ware. He's even shown up in the games that they got blown out. So Auburn, he was 6 of 13 from the floor, still scored 15. Against UConn, went 7 of 9. Pretty impressive there for 18 points. I haven't watched extensive tape, but as I look at part of his game, he provides what KJ Adams does for us. He's high energy. He's high motor. He's going to find a way to get his shot, especially when all the attention's on Ware. So I think, as I look at this team up and down, this is a pretty well matched, I think, roster against ours. As far as there's a lot of similarities on this team compared to ours. Just a lot of guys that do pretty similar things to what we do. So I think it's going to be a good matchup. But Malik Renault's the next one to watch. I think you'll see a lot of KJ on him. Might see a little bit of Kevin. But he's their next leading scorer there. And then after that, their guard Xavier Johnson, averaging about 10.5 a game. He's a senior, upperclassman. He's got experience. He's shooting about 50% from the field. He's the next guy to kind of look out for. And then after that, I mean, the difference about this Indiana team from some other teams you see out there is they play pretty deep. They'll play about 10 to 11 guys at least 5 minutes a night, and they play about 8 to 9 of them at least 12 minutes a night. So they're gonna get guys in and out. They're gonna spread you out. They're gonna find ways to get everyone involved. So I think that's something to keep out there. I know there's a guy on this team, Spencer, that you're kind of interested in. Tell us a little bit about Gabe Cupps.
Yeah, so Gabe Cupps, for our LeBron fans out there, he's on Bronny's AAU team growing up. Really good shooter, really talented player. He's a freshman, averages about 20 minutes a game. There's a video, you can go online and look at this, of him challenging LeBron James to a 3-point shooting contest. I don't remember who won, but if you have to ask yourself who won, that lets you know he's a pretty good shooter. So he's definitely somebody that's on my radar. Like you said, they're a pretty deep team, and for him to be carving out as big of a role as he is already as a freshman, he's going to be a really good player. Depending on how long he stays there. So I'm just excited to see him play in general, and he is the exact kind of guy that will come in off the bench and drop 10 threes on KU. The exact type of guy.
That's what I'm thinking.
The prototype.
Yep.
Because he doesn't do much at all this year offensively. For averaging 22 minutes a game, he's only averaging 3 points, which is basically open 3-pointers. But this has everything written on it as the classic. He goes 5 of 7 from deep. because KU can't get out to the line. At home in Assembly Hall, he's the guy that, would not be shocked if he has a big game. But as we get into kind of our game predictions here and talk about the details of this game, what are some of the points of emphasis or keys to the game you guys have heading into this matchup?
For me, we kind of touched on it. It is going to be our first true road test. So I don't expect this to be a Kansas blowout. I think KU overall, if you look on paper, I just think we're the way better team. And I'm not trying to be biased, but I just think we are the way better team. We've also played tougher competition. It really looks like it should be a blowout, and I hope it is. But Ken Pom kind of has us as like a 6-point favorite, and I think that's relatively accurate. And I'd kind of lean toward, for me, in a prediction, maybe like a 84-76 type of game in favor of Kansas.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'm not going with the blowout either because of how tough it is to play in Indiana. The thing that I'm, going to look out for, number one is turnovers. Our starting lineup combined for 15 turnovers against Mizzou, which is even crazier when you realize that Malker Jackson had 0. So that means 4 guys had a combined 15 turnovers against Missouri. So that's going to be challenging. You do not want to give up a lot of turnovers in a hostile environment, especially gets them out in transition, builds momentum towards the other team. So that's a big thing that I'm going to be worried on. I do think this is a team that we can really flex our offensive potential here. They've had games where they've given up a lot of points. We have a lot of guys that can score. So I'm interested to see how that's going to be. And the good news is this Indiana team shoots 27% from the 3-point line on the season. So if the three's not going to fall, they're going to try to force the ball inside to their center to, reach the other consistent offensive factor they have. So how well can Dickinson, Adams, and Brown, depending on how many minutes he plays, how well can they defend inside? That's going to be a big point of emphasis.
Yeah, but being in Indiana at Assembly Hall, I have the feeling Indiana is going to come out hitting. They're going to be fired up. I guess the thing I do feel good, though, about this matchup is KU has about a week of rest heading into this, with it being finals week. They've looked a little tired the last couple of weeks because they've played a lot of games, a lot of big-time games. So I think that's a good advantage heading into this matchup. As I look at this game, JB, you kind of said it, that maybe Ware and Hunter kind of, match each other up and take each other out of the game. If that's the case, I think we'll see a similar offensive look to what we saw against Missouri, in the sense of Kevin's going to go get his and KJ's going to have a big impact in the game. I think the goal is get Ware away from the basket so that you can drive and get some open looks there. I think, Kevin's going to have a big game. He's been doing it all year already. That's not going to change. But to me, I think this is a game where tough road environment, you got to have a good game from DeJuan Harris. DeJuan hasn't really done a whole lot this year. Not that he's been bad. He's been not as good compared to what his capabilities are and his ceiling is. He's turned the ball over. This is a game where I think he's got to be clean. He's got to have a clean passing game. He's got to find ways to impact the game offensively, not just dishing the ball, but look to get a shot here and there to keep Indiana, honest with the way they're matching up. But I like the matchup with this. I think this is going to be a great test for KU to go into a very hostile atmosphere with a very hyped up crowd, and just be another great test for them on the season, because we know we're going to have a lot of these when we get to Big 12 play. But the fact that they can put another one of these on the schedule in the non-con to really get the team going, I think it's going to be great. But yeah, DeJuan's got to have a good impact. I do think KJ is going to have another solid game. He's been the most consistent player this season. He's probably been the most valuable player, honestly. I mean, I know Hunter and Kevin have had huge seasons already. Kevin's had 2 triple-doubles. Hunter's had multiple double-doubles, has scored north of 20 points multiple times. But KJ just kind of quietly does his thing. He'll go 6 of 8 from the field, and he's got 16 points, and you're like, oh my gosh, what is he doing out here? We've seen games already this year where he's dominated a 4 or 5 minute stretch offensively and defensively. I think that continues. But I would love to see the bench get a little bit more active. Honestly, I'd like to see El Marco do a little bit more too. played decent against Missouri, got to the free throw line a couple times, ended up scoring double digits because of, getting to the line late. But I'd like to see him have an impact. This is an opportunity for him as a true freshman to see what he's capable of in a hostile environment under pressure, especially if he's running the point at any time with DeJuan out. So I think that's where I'm looking, is how can DeJuan and Elmarko control the tempo, create solid passing lanes, and find ways to control the ball and be protective of it, and then see what this bench can get involved. I don't have it quite as high a scoring game. I think this is going to be a kind of grinded out, more like a 72 to 64 type win. I think KU is going to show up defensively. I think they're going to have more rest and energy for this, but I also think Indiana is going to keep it interesting throughout the early part of the game, middle part of the game, and then KU, does what they do and slowly grind it out. But that's my prediction. I don't have any bets on this one yet because they haven't really posted all the individual player stuff yet. But I like Hunter to get a double-double. I like KJ to go over 15 points. I like DeJuan over 6 assists if you can find that anywhere this weekend. But yeah, I think it's going to be a great game. It's going to be a fun one to watch a little bit earlier, which we know is always a struggle when you have that early tip-off on the road. 11:30 a.m. It's kind of different. So hopefully they show up with the energy and firepower and do that. But I think we'll wrap up there for this one. Didn't want to spend too much time on the matchup itself because it's fun to kind of talk about it after the game, I think, more so than predicting it. But after this one, they've got 2 more games before Big 12 play. So we'll probably get one more non-con episode in, and then we'll have an episode just previewing the Big 12 as a whole. Talk about the top of the list of teams here in the Big 12, see where KU can kind of find themselves throughout the year, and dive into conference play itself. And then, of course, outside of KU basketball, we got KU football, the Guaranteed Rate Bowl coming up in a few weeks just after Christmas. Still working on some details for our episode on that, on which guests I'm going to have on to talk about that game with us. So stay tuned for that. Royals, if you're a Royals fan, we've got a Royals episode out right now. The Royals just signed a couple pitchers this weekend, a couple starters. So go check that one out if you haven't already. We've got one, and then there's going to be another one coming probably this weekend or Monday morning to talk about some other moves the Royals could make. And of course, the Chiefs, it's been a frustrating last few weeks, and the guys on the Aftermath have not been as excited about that. Of course, it's been frustrating, but still check out what they're doing. You can find them on Twitter at Aftermath_KC. We're not going to have a game preview per se for this weekend, but we'll still have another episode talking about the rest of the season. We kind of want to dive into the tail end of the season and talk about playoffs and all that kind of stuff. So plenty to check out, plenty to get involved with. And you guys, the best way to do all that is to hit that subscribe button right here on YouTube. You can hit that right now. You can also, if you're listening on Spotify, you can follow and like the podcast, give us a 5-star rating. We'd appreciate that. Of course, you can hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at KCSA Pod. And last thing, JB mentioned it at the beginning of the episode, but we've got our shirts. We're going to give 3 lucky winners a free shirt of the podcast. If you want a shirt, here's what you need to do. You need to, of course, watch this episode. Otherwise, you won't know about it. After you watch the episode or during the episode, leave in the comment section a rock chalk. And after the game is over on Sunday, we'll pick 3 winners. We'll reach back out to those in the comment section that did that. And get you a shirt here soon as we get ready for some orders. And we might extend that to those listening or watching on other areas as well, and maybe do something on Twitter and Facebook. So stay tuned for that. Guys, any other final comments before we get out of here?
Nope.
No, sir.
All right. Well, we'll check in with you guys next week as far as KU stuff is concerned. Let's go get a victory on the road this weekend in a tough environment and hope that we come out stronger than ever. We'll talk to you guys later. Rock Chalk.
Rock Chalk.